So I launched my Prism Series cymbals about 6 or 7 months ago, and it was after I got my hands on Dave King's Flat Ride that he's used on a bunch of records. He let me borrow it. I had it for many months. I made some tributes to that sound, and it got my ear headed towards this kind of new thing that I hadn't really dived deep into just yet in my career as a cymbalsmith. And that sound is more of a brighter sound, a little bit more shimmery, with some sparkly high-end stuff going on, and kind of reminiscent of some more of like an A Zildjian sound versus a K Zildjian sound. Every independent cymbalsmith seemingly starts out by chasing the K, dark, complex kind of thing, and I'm no exception to that. I did that. I've made a lot of really dark, trashy, complex sounding cymbals, and I'm feeling a change. Like I feel like I want to kind of explore, or at least round out my palette a little bit more. And so the new cymbals that are part of the Prism series now are an effort to aim in that direction. What I'm basically doing is I'm taking the Tributary series, which is like my vintage cymbal tribute kind of series. I employ these crazy patinas. I usually have funkier, old school types of sounds, old K kind of sounds. And the idea is just make that series, but with no patina and a brilliant finish instead. So this gives you a little bit more shimmer, a little bit more brightness on the top end, and a little bit more of a crisp kind of sound. All right, so first up, this cymbal I have in the main position is a 23-inch, and it's still relatively thin. We're kind of in like the 2,600 gram range for a 23, which is, that's fairly thin. It's got a hand-formed bell that's a little bit bigger and has a little bit more of a sloping transition. So this is kind of like an old K, but freshly made with a brilliant finish. So we still have that dark, nice complexity to it. But in the room, there's this real glassy top end and shimmer and sparkle on top of this kind of low growly thing. So you're getting like a real wide type of sound that has, I've said it in many videos before, it's kind of like the high fidelity sound, where you have all this top end shimmer, then you have the mids, and they have these lows, and they all feel very stretched apart. And those kinds of cymbals to me are my favorites because they feel really deep. Those cymbals are not the kind of cymbals that tend to be overly complex or trashy, growly, because those types of cymbals typically employ a tall profile, which another effect of that is it kind of squishes the sonic frequency range and you get less of that wide kind of feeling. So on first tap, these cymbals feel a little bit more versatile and a little less like punch you in the gut with like this crazy sound that you're like, whoa, what is that? But they really kind of draw you in a little bit more. They don't punch you so much as they just sort of like kind of invite you in. And as you play them, and especially as you take them on the gig, you realize you have something that's really usable in many types of genres. That glassy top end is needed for cut and clarity, especially with like jazz drummers that need a good, clear ride stick sound, and they need the patterns to be heard. You really want that kind of top end sibilance to be able to get through the mix. But as a jazz drummer especially, you want a lot of kind of growly complexity, darkness, and wash to be in there too, because that sort of draws you in. And it also works better with acoustic music. Cymbals that are too much of the bright, shimmery, glassy thing on top without a lot of depth and warmth to them as well end up being pretty shrill, and they don't work when you've got a bassist standing right next to the kit with his acoustic bass and he's over there kind of wincing every time you hit the ride. So there's a real balance that's needed there, and I think this cymbal in particular really does a good job of kind of melding the worlds a little bit. All right, next up we have something that's a little more funky, a little bit different. This over here is a 19.75, so 19 3/4 inch prism that weighs 1,719 grams. And you won't really be able to see it from this angle, but it's got a tall profile, tall kind of triangular profile. So it gives you a really different vibe. And yeah, I'll just play it and you can let me know what you think. Obviously, I got the 3 rivets in there, but because it has a taller shape to it, you have a bit more of a choked crash sound. There's not as much sibilance to it. The more umbrella shaped the cymbal is, you know, the higher pitch the stick is going to be, and the mid-range tones are going to be. But also the more choked it's going to be, so you don't have as much shimmer, like top-end shimmer that sustains long. That's kind of the reason for the rivets. It kind of gives it a little bit of extra juice and sustain. But this is a cymbal where you have the stick definition very much sitting on top of everything. You have a little bit of that ka, kind of old K, umbrella-shaped cymbal tonality to it. And this one feels a little bit more like the frequency spectrum is a little bit more squished, but you have this extra level of smokiness that's really nice. Over here on the far right, this is a 22 with the half flat thing going on. So we have the small bell, which gives you a little bit more of a glassy, flat ride-esque stick definition, which is nice. This one's very, very thin. This one's 2,158 grams. And I can get away with a thinner weight with these half flats because smaller the bell, the less sustain, the less volume, and the more stick definition you have. So I can afford to go thinner on the weight and maintain stick. This one also has kind of a medium tall profile, so you have this kind of roundness to the sound, a little bit less sibilance, a little bit less shimmer like the one on in the main position here. And that's just due to the thin weight. It kind of has a little bit less body to the sound. But you have this really clear stick that's really nice. You have a nice round kind of tonality that's a little bit more complex and warm. And overall, I'm digging that one. Now for something really different. So take this 23 off since I didn't show it to you in the light there. All of these cymbals have a brilliant finish. I think I mentioned that, but the method that I do to make the brilliant finish is hardening the outer portion of the bronze as it's making that shiny look. So you actually have a little bit more tick sound and a little bit of a more pointed sound on the stick definition because that outer portion of the bronze is actually harder. So this 22 here is a real thin one as well, has a bigger bell, 2,265 grams. This one is a really good example of a Prism Series cymbal that has a lot of this glassy, sparkly kind of sound sitting on top. It has a lot of the, it's the sheen kind of sound. If you can imagine like unsheathing a sword and the sound that would make as you're unsheathing the sword, it's kind of this really high sparkly ring sound. It has a really nice amount of that. It just dances on top of everything else that's going on with the cymbal. So it's got that sheen, but that sheen is sitting on top of this lower pitched, more complex, more growly kind of sound. I'm really a fan of that 22. So the last two I want to show you, we have this one here. This is a 22-inch Prism with a hand-formed bell. This one weighs 2,388 grams, so we got a little bit more weight on it. This one functions a lot more like the original 23 that I had. It just has a little bit more beefiness to it, and that beefiness it gives the sound a little bit more depth and body. And I really dig it. So this cymbal in particular has a little bit more of kind of a triangular shape. I didn't do any kind of hook out at the edge. It has a much more of a setup that's akin to more like an old A sort of sound. The bell is hand-formed, but it's a little bit taller and also more conical. So you have a kind of a brighter tonality, a little bit more of a chimey thing going on. A little bit less of that glassy sibilance on top. It's a little bit more mellow and rounded. But this one is another example of a cymbal I really, really like from the series. Last up, we have this guy. This is a 19¼ half flat Prism. Really, really, really small hand-formed bell there in the center. This one is very much like a flat ride. This one is close to the original cymbals that were in this series, where it's just flat rides, half flat rides, and it was just kind of that glassy flat ride sound. Now the reason for a small bell, it's kind of hard to hit. You can hit it, but you have a little bit of a target to hit. It's a little bit more of an aim thing you got to have. But the point in the small bell is really just to open up the cymbal a little bit more and give it a crash. Flat rides usually don't have a good crash unless they're really thin. So it allows you to get away with more of a beefy sounding cymbal that has the stick definition similar to a flat ride, but you can also crash it and get a pretty nice crash out of it. I also have hi-hats in this series, and these hi-hats are kind of in the vein of old A's, thinner old A's. A lot of times I'm doing these as match-weighted cymbals. So this set here is a set of 15s, and we got a 970-gram top over a 982-gram bottom. So very close in weight. 2 hand-formed bells on these that are both different sizes. So because they're, close enough in weight, you could just swap them, put whatever one you want on the top, and get different tones depending on which one is on the top. All right, so this is just a little quick run-by of the new cymbals that are going in the Prism series. These cymbals are all available or have been sold in the first batch, but I just figured I would at least show you guys the first few and just know there's going to be a lot more coming in this vein. And the cool thing about these series, now that I have the Prism series where I want it, I feel like I finally have a fully well-rounded catalog of cymbals that kind of capture all of the sounds that I have in my head that I'm going for with the cymbals that I make. So we have the Prism series like these, which are going to be, in short, a little bit glassier, a little bit more of a shimmery, sparkly top end, but still with the warmth and complexity of a handmade cymbal. Then we have the Landmark series, which is kind of my flagship. It's sort of the warm, dark sounds, refined, complex, all of that. Then I've got the Labyrinth series, which are a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more trashy and complex. They have taller shapes typically, and they give you a little bit more of a kind of dragon's breath kind of growly thing. Then I have the Foundation series, which I am currently working on the launch of that series and kind of the new cymbals that are going to be a part of it. Those cymbals are going to be the workhorse cymbals, so they're going to be heavier by nature. I will make thin ones, but the standard ones are going to be heavier by nature. They're going to utilize partially unlathed crusts or fully unlathed crusts on the cymbal to give them articulation, control, and then bells that are really, really strong that you could use to cut through a rock band, no problem. So that's the Foundation series. And then after that, we have the Tributary series. Then that's the one that's kind of like the Prism series, except I take it I add these heavy patinas and do the overhammering processes. And what that does is give it more of a smoky, controlled type of sound. So you have this really dry, smoky, controlled sort of vintage cymbal vibe. So that's the series that I have. I'm really excited about just everything that's been going on with this whole journey of being a craftsman and really exploring to see what I'm capable of doing with bronze. So if you're interested in learning more, you can go to reveriedrums.com. I drop batches on the website about every month, and then I have forms where you can place an order for a commission. And basically place an order for a commission, and I'm in touch with you, and we talk about the kind of stick you use, the kind of venues you play in, the volume level you like to use, and then I'm able to cater one of my cymbals from the series towards your sound, so it can get you something that you would really love. I also have a fully custom tailored commission option, which is a great place if you have a cymbal that you've heard in a record and you're like, oh man, I would love to get that kind of cymbal made, a tribute made to that sound. That's where I really go super in depth, and I'll usually make multiple cymbals at one time, and then you get to pick the one that feels the most like the sound you had in your head with that. So again, that's reveriedrums.com. But please drop a comment below and let me know what you think of the new Prism Series cymbals. I know we got a lot of guys out there that love dark, complex sounds, but we need to give a little bit to the guys that like brighter sounds, kind of like the guys that love old vintage A's. They don't get enough love, I don't think. So drop a comment below, let me know what you think. Hit the subscribe and the bell if you want notifications, and keep an eye out for the next video. I'm Timothy Roberts. Thanks for watching.